actually a routing engine. It makes use of a routing engine. Makes use of a routing engine. And Angular routing engine. Angular routing engine. So routing engine is IV. IV. IV is the routing engine used by Angular. So from Angular 9 onwards, so it is integrated into Angular. So it's a new engine actually. So this IV engine allows to configure and handle the routes. Every technology requires a view engine. So it requires a view engine and a routing engine. So view engine dynamically renders HTML. Here IV controls the routing and the view rendering. That means request processed and generated. Actually, this IV engine it make uses of a route table. It make uses of a route table actually. It make uses of a route table. So that means usually what happens is we create the routes. So then usually we have a route table. Generally we have a route table. So route table. This route table contains the collection of routes. It contains the collection of routes. Routes means path and which component to render. Component to render. All such details are present. So you have an Angular application. We have an Angular application. Now in the Angular application, we have collection of components. So we have all the components and we have an index page. We have an index page. So component 1, component 2, component 3. These all components related information is configured in this route table, is loaded into route table. So route table. Now when client makes a request, so first it will verify in the route table that component is available or not. If it is available, then it loads that component into the application. So that loads the component into application. That means whenever your application starts on the initialization of application, in the first phase, the route table is created. In the route table, it will load all the routes. Routes contains the information about the components and their request path. How a component should be requested, that path configuration will be there. So routing engine will verify from the path whether the requested URL is available or not. If it is available, then it loads. What is the specialty of this IV engine is inbuilt it uses an AJAX calls. So without reloading the complete page, it can bring the new component and load into the page. That is what actually routing can do. That means routing will not allow the user to navigate out of the page. User will stay on one page and everything comes onto that page. So earlier what we were doing is, earlier in our project, whenever we designed an example, to access that example, we were setting it in the startup. So now in the startup, you will have only one component and everything will come there. Everything will come there. So that is what actually the concept of routing is. How do we configure the routes? So how we have to configure and add the routes. So let's see that. Here, so many things we will learn one by one. We will discuss about them because so many options are there. Child routes, parent routes, how do we manage them, right? Yeah. Initially, how do we enable routing in our application? Routing in our application, right? To enable routing in our application, we need a router module. We need a router module. Actually, it will ask for router module at the time of routing. And if router module is ignored at the time of creating application, actually, so we ignored at the time of creating application. So because when it asked, do you want to add routes, we said no, then router module is not added into our project, so we need to add a router module now, so that we can use this routing. So how do we add a router module? How do we configure the router module? So manually we can add actually a router module. Module is required in application. A router module is required in application that loads the routes that configures and loads the routes, that configures and loads the routes on startup. So for that, actually we need a special class, that is we need to add a module, that is app routing dot module.ts. app routing module.ts. We can generate modules. So through commands ng generate module, we can generate the modules, right? So here, so in this, technically, how do we define? So configure, technically how we write the router. Actually, we need to import. So one is ng module. We need to import ng module. So one ng module from Angular core. ng module we have to import from Angular core. Another, we need to import two options. One is routes, another one is router module. We need to import these two from Angular router. So we need to import from Angular router. We need to import these two. And what ng module can do is, ng module can export all your routes and loads into that route. So importing and exporting of routes is done by using ng module. So technically, so you have to export a class. So app routing module. This is a simple class, empty. So here, how do we configure the routes? Actually, routes are configured. So by using a constant routes, by implementing this routes, it is of type routes. It is a collection of routes. Now here the point is, why you are defining routes as constants? Because they must be initialized. Initialization is mandatory. So, and constant means collection of initializations. That means every route must be initialized so that it should be loaded into the route table. And they are ready to serve the application. So every route must be initialized. In that case, routes must be a collection of constants, because constants will not allow